Your first big question of your exam was a 12-mark question asking you to assess the reasons why managing the impact of economic hazard varies in its effectiveness. 12-mark questions means that you have to do um, two piece paragraphs. Okay, so the way I would have personally structured it would be the first paragraph on managing the impacts. Okay, remember there's different types of impacts, which is why they also vary in effectiveness. So the first point I'd make in paragraph 1 would be that actually one reason they vary in why impacts vary and the effectiveness of management varies is because of level of development. High-income countries tend to manage these better than low-income countries. You can compare data from Japan, HIC, and Haiti, which is LIC, and then explain why Japan managed the impact of its earthquake better. I remember Japan had a much stronger earthquake. They did really well at managing there was no one who died actually in the earthquake in Japan. So you could talk about Japan's earthquake-proof buildings, strict building codes, early warning systems. However, people did die in Japan, 20,000, and all down to the tsunami. So you could say, however, it could be hard to manage different scales and different impacts or hazards. In the case of Japan, they were really prepared for the earthquake. They weren't quite so prepared for the tsunami. So even though it is a HIC, that might be one reason why managing hazards varies in effectiveness is because they might have planned for one, not planned for another type of hazard. They might have planned for social impacts, not planned for environmental impacts. And the scale of the impacts too. Okay, it could be on the kind of global scale, national scale, local scale. Overall, what do you think between the development? Do you think development matters in a way to deal with hazards? Okay, paragraph number 2. Look at different perspective. You could say, well, another reason managing the effectiveness of a hazard varies is location. Haiti, which is in a multiple hazard zone, is much more prone to numerous hazards like tropical storms, like earthquakes, and so it makes it really hard for them to be able to recover. Okay, hard to manage because they might be hit by several hazards within a few weeks of each other. Um, there's also an island, so it's quite remote. It's hard to manage the impacts because it's hard to send emergency services, for example. Okay, so you can explain why countries in multiple hazard zones suffer more. Think about the frequency, the intensity of different hazards, why it's slower to recover, especially for low-income countries. And then you could also, however, say, well, actually, countries in multiple hazard zone, they might not be wealthy, but they've got great, unfortunately, experience. So Japan has learned to cope and become more resilient. Some countries have really developed a tough shell because they've learned to deal with hazards again and again and again and again, and that experience beats anything. There's some countries who are much lower income country than the UK. If they had a hazard, they'd probably deal with it better than us because we are not prepared. Okay, they have the experience, they know how to respond quickly. Overall, what do you think? Okay, other things you could have talked about in some paragraphs. These are just suggestions. You could have talked about the time of the event will affect the effectiveness of the response. So if it happens at 4 a.m., it has a massive impact. The type of governance will have a massive impact. The remoteness of the location. Think about Nepal as earthquake. It was in mountains, hard to get to. The amount of aid a country might receive and level of urbanization. So the more dense a city is, the harder it is to manage impacts because there's more potential, more casualties. Okay. So in the mark scheme, these were examples of AO1 you got rewarded for. And these are examples of AO2 you would have got rewarded for. So I'll leave that there. You can read it in your own time, but I just thought I'd share the mark scheme with you. Okay.